me to just play it. Come after me. I'm a man. I'm for you. Can't wait. Let's go.
Good morning and welcome. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show here on Sports Empire Network. I am Chris, and of course, that is Mo. Mo, how are you this morning, sir?
Doing well, Chris. Doing well. Thanks to everybody for checking us out this morning. Let's go.
Mo, happy to be back here with you this morning. Sorry that I missed yesterday. So much stuff to talk about. I'm jealous that I missed some of the conversations from yesterday. But let's get into the football game that we had last night because, you know, that was a good time for everyone involved. Mo, if I was the Chicago Bears, I would fire Matt Eberflus this morning. I felt better about that when I thought they were going to lose last night, 10-9. They pull out the win. So, you know, now I look at it and I say that it's a parting gift, if you will. Let the man leave with a win on his resume. His first win against a division rival in the last 13 games. But you look at that game last night, and I take nothing away from what Matt Eberflus has accomplished with the Chicago Bears defense. The defense was incredible last night. The defense caused 4 turnovers. The defense had constant pressure on Joshua Dobbs the entire evening. The defense has not necessarily been the issue at all times, because I'm not saying the Chicago Bears are a top 5 or top 10 defense. They've been middle of the pack to above average, and that's fine. That's where you want them to be. They have a lot of pieces on the defensive side. So defense, I'm not concerned about, Mo. What I'm concerned about is you turn over the Vikings 4 times and you only score 3 points off of it. Like, when is that going to change? And in my opinion, it's not going to change anytime soon. And maybe, Mo, maybe the Chicago brass knows that Matt's not part of their future plans next season anyways, when they're going to have all these picks and all this cap space. So maybe in their minds, they're just like, we're not going to go through that process of having an interim head coach and creating all the unrest. It doesn't matter. We know what the end result's going to be anyways, so we're just going to ride it out. And maybe that's where they are. Or maybe they're considering keeping him. I don't know. But nothing about last night's performance makes me feel any better about him as the leader of this team.
No, I felt the same way. So I'm watching the game and the feel. If you go on feel in the turnovers, you felt like the Bears should be up 21 points. You felt like the defense gave you a dominant performance. They gave you a short side of the field that you're going to win this game running away. And instead, it is a nail biter. And I look at the head coach and I go, under this regime, I think this is your ceiling under this regime. And to go forward with this regime, with all the picks, with all the cap space, you're right. They might be considering him, bringing him back because they don't want to go through the rigmarole of looking for a coach, starting all over again. But I would say, because you're in the early stages of Justin Fields' career, if you go forward with Justin Fields, and I think they might, I would look to get a better leader to lead your team going forward. A better leader who can manage his OCs and his defensive coordinators. I just think overall, leadership, it starts with leadership. And I just think there's a lack of leadership in that franchise, and it starts with the head coach.
On the Minnesota Vikings side, the Josh Dobbs show might be over in Minnesota. Vikings head coach acknowledged that all things are on the table as Minnesota heads into their bye week, and that includes a potential change at the quarterback position. I understand that Josh Dobbs threw 4 interceptions last night. 3 of them were on tip balls. His first pick was absolutely terrible. His second pick was right in Addison's hands. I think Dobbs actually just threw the ball too hard. It kind of surprised Addison. And the last two, they weren't necessarily great passes, but they were tipped, and they were tipped into defenders' hands. And that happens sometimes. We see a lot of times tip balls don't get caught by defenders. It just kind of is what it is, but he did not play well last night. There was no real rhythm within the offense last night, except for the one touchdown drive. So I understand what Minnesota is looking at, but for me, and this was kind of brought up last night. Last night, the broadcast made it very pro Kirk Cousins. They spoke about Kirk Cousins as though Minnesota wants him back. They spoke about Kirk Cousins as in it's almost a lock that he's going to come back, assuming that Minnesota just wants to pay him the money, which obviously is a lot of money for Minnesota to give up. And we don't know. We don't know what Minnesota is looking at. What we do know is Minnesota will most likely not be in contention for one of the top quarterbacks coming out of the draft, Mo. So if in the back of your mind, Kirk Cousins is an option to come back, if you can't get your hands on one of the young guys to basically reset your franchise, if that's what's going to happen, why not just roll with Dobbs? Because I don't think you have another quarterback on your roster currently that's going to give you any better of a chance to win. It might be equal footing. So why not roll with it, see what happens? You still don't have Justin Jefferson back. I mean, you didn't think you were going to be in this position a month ago with Kirk Cousins. You definitely didn't think you were going to be in it 3 weeks after Kirk Cousins went down. So if I'm the Vikings, I roll with it and see what happens. And if we make the playoffs, then, bonus for us, because there were multiple times this season where you didn't think you were going to make the playoffs for various reasons.
And look, if Cousins comes back, to me, Joshua Dobbs will have established himself as your backup. I mean, you could do a lot worse than Josh Dobbs as a backup quarterback. I always say that your backup needs to be a guy that can get you a few games where your starter's down. That's Joshua Dobbs. And he's one of those kind of guys that also inspires a locker room. So I would go ahead and finish out the season with Dobbs because, like you said, he gives you as good a chance as anybody that's currently playing. And if you're going to run it back with Kirk Cousins, he is a perfect backup, a veteran backup to a veteran quarterback.
The loss for the Vikings, Mo, when you're looking at the NFC, it does a lot. It does a lot for the NFC as far as those teams that were kind of sitting behind Minnesota looking in. So if you take a quick look at the NFC playoffs this morning, obviously your top, you have Philly, San Fran, and then you have Detroit. Our fun team, our fun spot, if you will, are the 5 and 6 Atlanta Falcons. But if you look at the 6 and 7 spots, Seattle 6 and 5 is the 6th spot right now. Minnesota 6 and 6 is the 7th. Minnesota losing basically opens that door to reinvigorate Green Bay, the Los Angeles Rams, and the New Orleans Saints, who are all 5 and 6. It also gives a little more hope than maybe they had before to a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 4 and 7,
correct,
who are only a couple games now behind that spot. So, and I get it, should we be talking playoffs with the 4 and 7 Buccaneers? No, we should not be talking playoffs. But if you look at the 4 and 7 Bucs, their division leader is 5 and 6. So that's within striking distance. The 7th seed in the playoffs is 500 at 6 and 6. That's within striking distance. So you look at teams that are a game or two under 500, and because the final playoff spot in the NFC right now is at 500, and then you throw in what's happening in the NFC South with those teams, there are still teams that aren't very good that have playoff aspirations and are still going to be playing meaningful football down the stretch. And that could be annoying to some of the better NFC teams that maybe at this point in the season, Mo, these kind of teams would just kind of like roll over and just not get in the way. But now they have something to actually play for. So, I'm not complaining about potentially competitive football from various teams in the NFC down the stretch.
All the way up to the last week of the season, we could be getting competitive football. And just for the record, I think that applies to both conferences.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the AFC here a little bit later in the show. But right now, what I want to do is I want to bring JG on the show. And we're going to talk baseball with JG like we always do.
But you want to talk about those Saints.
I want to talk a little Saints, but I got a college football question for JG. And he mentioned it sets up nicely because he mentioned Harbaugh in the chat. And that's who my college question is going to focus around is good old Jimmy Harbaugh. So let's welcome JG to the show. JG, how are you this morning, sir?
Man, I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Morning, JG.
Morning, guys.
JG, so we'll get our baseball stuff out of the way first. The news broke yesterday officially from the Yankees. They are not in on Shohei Ohtani. They're focusing.
Well, that was the worst. That was the worst kept secret.
They're focusing all of their attention on the Japanese pitcher because that's where they think that they're going to be able to have a chance. So I totally understand that. There's also talk about Bellinger coming in as a free agent. There's also talk about the Soto trade. So I see what the Yankees are doing. So I see why they necessarily wouldn't be in on Shohei. But again, I stand firm. If George was still alive, come hell or high water, Shohei Ohtani would be a Yankee. But I want to talk this morning about Dylan Cease. So Dylan Cease is drawing a lot of interest from various parts of the league, specifically the Dodgers and the Braves. And the Braves, and it's weird to say, JG, the Braves have kind of struck out when it comes to shoring up their pitching rotation early on in the process. And it's only weird to say because the Braves are a bona fide World Series contender. And they're ready to go. They have the team in place. They have a couple of holes to fill. One is on the pitching side of it. And you would think that guys, the money's there. It's not like they're trying to, put someone in there on the cheap and be like, hey, we only got a little to spend, so take it or leave it. No, they're offering market value for these guys, and they're choosing to sign elsewhere. I know you touched on this briefly yesterday, but I want to hear it from you. What do you think is the initial pushback from some of these guys going to Atlanta? And then what do you think is going to be the market for Dylan Cease if it decides that he's going to be available?
So to the outsider, the Braves have struck out because they pursued Aaron Nola. He re-signed with Philadelphia. They pursued Sonny Gray. He signed with St. Louis. Yeah, they are looking for a starting pitcher to throw into the rotation because, again, Max Fried is a free agent after 2024. They're following the same playbook they did with Freddie Freeman, having his contract run out, say, hey, we'll make you an offer, but it's probably not what you want it to be, and you're more likely going to go elsewhere from there. Same thing with Dansby Swanson last year in the 2022-2023 offseason. We'll make you an offer, probably not what you're going to get on the open market, and you're going to go elsewhere as well. So Max Fried, they're kind of following that same suit, that he's still there in 2024, but they want somebody at least to, for the time of this year and for the future. But they're not wanting to break free from what they have done in their business for over 30 years. The Braves don't spend big money on free agents. They just don't. The last time, the biggest contract they have given to a free agent was B.J. Upton. And we know how that went, that it did not go very well for the Braves. They have most of the moves they usually make are from trades. They traded for Matt Olson, traded for Sean Murphy. Years you can go down the road. They traded for Dansby Swanson, who was still in the minors. They traded for Justin Upton. They traded for Max Fried, who was in the minor leagues as well at one point. So a lot of the moves they usually do make is through trades, and that's where you kind of tie into the Dylan Cease move right now. But they're following suit on who they are, because at the same time they do view a starting pitcher on the free agent market almost as a luxury right now, because they still do have Spencer Strider. They do have Max Fried for one more year, but they have Spencer Strider, who's a Cy Young candidate. And I know he wasn't a finalist, but he was a candidate. You do have Charlie Morton for at least one more year, and I know he's 40 years old. He's going to be 40 years old next year, but you have him for one more year. Now, this is where the Braves kind of started thinking a little bit more ahead of the game, because they did this with Strider, have him as a starter 1 year, and then they signed him to an extension to pass through his arbitration years. You have A.J. Smith-Shawver, who they are very high on. He's the number one prospect in their farm right now. They have Spencer Schellenbacher, who is the number 2 pitcher in their farm system. And they have a kid who I'm probably very high on, because I got to see him pitch at the University of Florida, pitched against my LSU Tigers in the National Championship Series in Omaha, Hurston Waldrop. I believe Hurston Waldrop is probably the best pitching prospect in the Braves organization right now, and that includes A.J. Smith-Shawver. He's in there, who's already, after only 4 months in the minors, he's already in AAA. So they're moving with some of these young guys that they are very high on. Now, to tie into Dylan Cease, I'm open to bringing in Dylan Cease. One, if he can refine what made him good in 2022, because 2023 he was very up and down and very all over the place. Now, Chicago White Sox is a dumpster fire of a team. They're, and lately over the last few years, they've been a dumpster fire of an organization. So I'm not holding that necessarily against Dylan Cease, but he's got to have to figure out a little bit more of his control and miss bats, because he got hit pretty hard throughout the season in 2023. But I'm okay bringing Dylan Cease in if I make a move, much like the Baltimore Orioles did for Jack Flaherty, where you don't trade your number 1, you don't trade your number 2, and you don't trade your number 3 prospects to get that pitcher. I'm fine with that. A.J. Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop, to me, are untouchable. I am not trading either one of them. And that would be probably the asking price for Cease, if the White Sox are really trying to push that, is they're going to want top prospects. I'm fine trading Spencer Schellenbach, but I'm not trading Hurston Waldrop and Smith-Shawver, who I think Shawver's going to be a bullpen piece, and Waldrop will be a rotation piece here in the near future, who probably will be the one who replaces Max Fried after 2024, will be Hurston Waldrop. So Dylan, great. I would love to have him, because he makes that bullpen, he makes that rotation a little bit longer, a little bit stronger. But I want the Braves to continue to be who they are, and that's developing pitchers, developing them to be young, studs, and let them loose, because you do have 2 horses in your farm that are ready to go.
JG, let's switch a little bit to the NFL. Somebody has to win the NFC South. I know that no one seems to really want to do it this season. The entire division is under 500. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say the Carolina Panthers are not going to win the division. I'm pretty comfortable in saying that, and Mo agrees with me. But as far as the other 3 teams go, any 3 of these teams could win it. 2 of them are tied, and then one of them is only a game behind. JG, first of all, what is going on with those 3 franchises in Tampa and New Orleans and Atlanta? I mean, Atlanta basically threw in the towel a few weeks ago when they benched Desmond Ridder, and they were like, it's done. We're going to be very competitive. We're going to go with Heineke and see what happens. And then they realized they were still in this thing somehow. And they're like, well, hang on. Let's bring Ridder back a second here and see if he can actually do something, since we're playing for first place and everything against the Saints. They pull out the game. No, they didn't look spectacular. None of these teams have looked spectacular this season. I still would argue that the Saints have the best talent on both sides of the ball when you put everything down on paper and combine it all together, but that doesn't really seem to matter in this division. So what is your final prediction for the NFC South, and what are we looking at as far as potential coaching changes when this season ends? Because I don't care who wins this division or how competitive the other 2 teams are. There's a lot of issues happening in the NFC South right now.
Can we trade the NFC South for University of Georgia, LSU, and Alabama?
It would be more competitive.
I'd rather those 3 teams compete in the NFC South. I'd rather those 3 teams compete in the NFC South than what I'm watching with the Saints, Falcons, and Buccaneers right now. What's going on is that you have three franchises that have been in transition years over the last, I guess you could say, in the span of 3 to 5 years, because the Saints, Drew Brees, Sean Payton, and they're in the transition years now with Dennis Allen, and Derek Carr. Last year was Jameis Winston and whatnot. Tampa Bay, Bruce Arians, Tom Brady, And then Atlanta had Matt Ryan, and I know they didn't have a great coach, with them, but you had a franchise quarterback in Matt Ryan that you're still trying to figure out who the next guy is with your franchise. So all three franchises have been in transition years in the last 3 to 5 years. And that's what they're struggling, trying to figure out in the direction that they're trying to go, because they all built their rosters to be competitive. But what's the most important position in all of sports in the world? The quarterback. And they have all struggling to figure out who the quarterback's going to be with a roster, all three teams with a roster that is competitive now. And that's where you're getting 500 ball, less than 500 ball. And then you throw in the fact that you have subpar coaches and Arthur Smith, Dennis Allen, and oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the Buccaneers coach.
Todd Bowles.
Thank you, Todd Bowles. Yeah. So you don't have great coaches. You don't have great quarterbacks with teams that are all built to be competitive. They're almost in purgatory right now with how they're structured, because they don't know which direction to go. And I'm speaking more so about my Saints, because we don't have things in place to be a playoff contending team now. If you asked me this, and I know y'all probably did it, 2 months ago when we were in the beginning part of the season, and I'm like, I'm bullish. I was high on. I'm like, hey, yeah, we have everything in place. We're ready to go. And I'm probably more pessimistic now than I've ever been, probably since the Jim Haslett days of the New Orleans Saints. That's where we're at right now. And this is very similar to the Jim Haslett days, where you're good, but you're not good enough. And that's what you're seeing with the Saints. That's what you're seeing with the Buccaneers. And that's what you're seeing with the Atlanta Falcons, is that you're good, but you're not good enough. You have moments where you're good, and you have moments where you're just god awful. There's never been a moment so far for any of these three teams that you're like, man, that's great football. Where you see, and I know a lot of teams aren't saying there's a lot of great football right now, but you can't even say there's really good football in the NFC South right now. So there's a lot of transition going on. I don't know. I can't pick a winner in this division, because nobody has shown that they actually want to take control. The Saints had a chance this weekend to take control of this division, and they couldn't do anything with 5 freaking chances in the red zone. You have 2 turnovers, and you kick 5 field goals. So you had a chance to be the top dog in this division and moving into. They had that issue with the Packers. They had that issue with the Vikings. They had that issue with the Texans. They've had this issue throughout the year. And you throw in the Falcons. You could talk about this team. I said this team was a 12-win team. I believe they had the potential to be a 12-win team. Well, guess what? We're 5 wins right now. If you take the Packers game, which they had a 17-point lead in the Packers game, you blow the opportunity to come back and beat the Vikings. You blow the opportunity against the Texans, and you blow against the opportunity against the Falcons. You could be 9 wins right now. You could be 9 wins right now if you finished the job that you had in 4 games, and that's where we're struggling with it right now. So flip a coin, get a coin, and say, hey, heads or tails for the Saints, heads and tails for the Falcons, heads and tails for the Buccaneers. I don't know. I like I said, jokingly and not jokingly, I'd rather see the Alabama, Georgia, and LSU compete for the NFC South more than I want to see these 3 teams.
And Mo, it doesn't get any easier for the Saints this upcoming weekend. They have the Lions, whereas you look at the other 2, the Falcons get the opportunity to play the New York Football Jets, and then the Buccaneers have the opportunity to play the Carolina Panthers. So, but again, would you be surprised if the Panthers come out and beat the Bucs? Not necessarily. Would you be surprised if the Jets find a way to lock down Ritter on offense and beat the Falcons? Not really. I would be surprised if the Saints beat the Lions, considering how they've played the past couple of weeks. But again, this has been the NFL this season. So if you are a Saints fan, you have to hope that you can kind of upset the Lions this week, because it looks like the Falcons and the Buccaneers are probably going to win their games because they're playing terrible teams. But who truly knows? But JG, before you get out of here, I want to talk a little. We got you all over this morning. We're talking baseball, we're talking football, and now we're going to talk some college football. So when the whole thing at Michigan initially comes out, they got the sign stealing thing going on. Initially, there's no connection to Harbaugh. It was just an overzealous guy who was going to games and having things recorded. And then you look at it and you're like, well, it's not necessarily on the up and up, but, sign stealing, just don't get caught. Like, that's a bad look. But at the same time, it is what it is. I mean, he's sitting he's sitting in the audience, or he has people sitting in the audience. It's not like, anything super crazy is happening. But then we find out there's another layer to it, and we find out about the Michigan manifesto and all this nonsense. And then we find out that there might be another layer, JG, where they were taking some of the information they got from these games and they were giving it to other teams. Teams that they, would prefer if they won games against certain teams to make their chances better. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to put into the air, but then you start looking at the potential paper trail, and it might be there or it might not be there. Obviously, the NCAA needs to figure it out, and other people need to figure it out. But JG, let's assume that where there is smoke, there is fire, and that is what happened. Let's assume that after they got the signs and they broke down the signs and they figured out the signs, they called some other coaches and were just like, hey, you're playing Maryland this week. Be on the lookout for this. What is your take? Because you can look at that and you can say, well, that's an issue. That's a big issue. Or you could live in the gray area and be like, well, if Jim is friends with the Maryland head coach and they're playing a team this week and they're just talking, and the coach is like, what do you think of this team's defense? And Jim just gives his opinion because he's already played them or he's seen that. Like where is that line, JG? Because the information given about the signs, if Michigan's already played that team, he would kind of already have that information regardless, right? And I know I'm living in a lot of gray right now, but let's assume they prove all this in the first place, because I'm not even confident they're going to be able to do that. But if they do prove all of that, where do you fall on what Michigan's essentially being accused of?
So let me answer your question with a question to start at least. Didn't teams know Michigan was already doing this? And didn't teams inform TCU? Who was it? Was it Ohio State that informed TCU that, hey, they do this? That they're getting signs. They figured out how to get signs. So be on the lookout for it. And what did TCU? TCU did dummy signs. They were told ahead of time of what Michigan was doing. So you're going to have, speaking as a coach here, do we have conversations? And I know I never coached football, but coaching baseball, we have conversations with coaches and say, hey, yeah, we played so and so, they did this to this. You'll have conversations between coaches, and it's a fraternity basically. It's a community of coaches that always talk about everybody and anything that goes on with other programs and what other coaches do, who you like and who you don't like, and who's trying to screw who over and who's trying to take advantage of this. So They I'm sure Michigan tried to skew the favor and with other teams that will benefit them, but at the same time, teams did the same thing to them, and they paid the price with TCU basically getting one up on them in the semifinal last year, where they said, okay, hey, thank you for telling us. Now we're going to be more prepared and we can plan out how to do this, and we'll screw them over in there. Again, it's a gray area. It is a gray area because, again, it's how they got their signs and the effort. I think that's more it's not the sign stealing occurs. Again, that's why you have programs that have the signs that the pictures of everybody out there and say decipher it if you can, because they all know about it. And this is my big argument, because I've heard this before on ESPN and whatnot. If you don't want the stealing to take place, because it's not just Michigan, the entire Big Ten has come out and they've been proof that other teams in the Big Ten figure out how to decipher signs and everything. Again, the key word I'm going to use here is the effort that Michigan used to get the signs. I think is the biggest issue here. But other teams have done things to figure out what other team signs are. But the argument I heard on ESPN is this: if you don't want teams to figure out your signs, guess what? The NFL has earpieces in your helmets. They communicate to your linebackers, communicate to your quarterback. That eliminates all that altogether. But they don't want that. They have voted against that for years about putting the communicator in their helmets. So that's a different. I guess that'd be a different argument here. But I think the biggest drawback of what's going on, and I said is the key word, is the effort that Michigan went to steal signs. if you can, I mean, we have this in baseball again. Was the whole Houston Astros thing? Sign stealing in baseball has been going on for 100 years. You look, I can watch a coach, in our dugout. I can watch the opposing team's coach try to figure out what their pitch call signs are. I can watch the third base coach and see what the steal sign is. But it's what the Houston Astros issue was the effort they went to steal signs by doing it with the technology and computers and cameras and everything like that. It's the same thing with the Michigan. It's the effort that went in to steal signs is the biggest drawback of this whole thing, this whole situation. Is you sending coaches to Central Michigan, you're sending coaches to Michigan State, you're sending coaches to other schools to sit in certain states and be able to just with a binocular and record everything that's going on from there. That's the effort that was put in more place. And ignorance is not an excuse. Is the whole, we've heard this before from coaches. Harbaugh should be held accountable because it is your coach. You're the head coach. You're the top dog in your staff. You should be held accountable for it. And I think he should be, and he so far has. Now the question is because there's supposed to be a 3-game suspension. Now what happens? Is he going to be suspended for the playoff if they make it? That's going to be the next question the NCAA is going to have to figure out, and the Big Ten is going to have to figure out. But I don't. The gray area is what it is because, again, as I said, teams have figured out how to take advantage of Michigan sign stealing. TCU being the one that did it in the playoff last year.
JG, we appreciate having you on the show every morning. We'll see you back here on Thursday. All right, sir.
I appreciate it, guys.
Mo, if you had to guess right now, $1 million briefcase on the table, you pick right, it belongs to you. Is Jim Harbaugh at Michigan next season? Because for every story that we hear about the team rallying around him, the players rallying around him, the school rallying around him, for all those stories, then we get stories like this where you're like, damn, the NCAA might crush Michigan because the more that comes out, the more you're like, it's not looking good.
And to JG's point where everybody does steal and he's talking about the effort that they put into it, I feel the same way. I feel like Michigan, they took it to like the Mission Impossible level. And I think Jim Harbaugh had that speech with his guys like, if you or any member of your team is captured, I will disavow your actions. I didn't have nothing to do with it. That whole spiel, right? I don't think Jim Harbaugh is back at Michigan. And I honestly, I think Jim Harbaugh wants to win it all and walk away, right? But I don't think he's back at Michigan. More importantly, I don't think Michigan wants Jim Harbaugh back at Michigan. They're like, you're doing all this stuff, man, and we're going to take the heat when you go. We're going to get all this heat. You're going to be long gone, and they're going to be talking about sanctions and suspensions. And it's going to be kind of like what happened when Pete Carroll bounced. And you knew USC was going to catch hell, and they did. I think Jim Harbaugh, I'll take the $1 million in the briefcase. He is not going to be back at Michigan.
And Mo, isn't this what Michigan wants almost? Because they're riding the wave to a potential national championship, and they're not creating friction between themselves and Harbaugh. They're not really putting him on an island. They're supporting him. They're doing everything that they can, at least on the surface. We don't know what it feels like at Michigan, so maybe he's feeling different vibes than what we're seeing. But doesn't it almost seem like they're trying as much as possible to embrace him and get hopefully to a national championship game so they can get their natty out of this? And then right. And then either they're going to fire him or what most likely is going to happen is he's going to resign, right, and which they'll be happy with. But can't you almost argue that they're complacent in all of this because they want something out of this too? If they didn't, he wouldn't be here right now.
They would. You're spot on, Chris. Look, what Michigan is trying to do is go, we're complying with everything the NCAA is saying and doing. Right. So their hands are clean on that front. On the other hand, they're like, well, since we're still working with Harbaugh outside the box. But they don't want friction between Harbaugh. They're trying to be Switzerland. They're trying to keep clean hands in all this because, like you said, the eye on the prize, they want that national title. And once they get the national title, then they're going to look, Jim, it didn't work out.
Right.
It's not you. It's not you.
Investigation came in.
Right.
We realized you did some bad stuff. We don't support what you did. Right. It's time to go.
Right. I'd be asking crazy questions like, how did you get their shirts and stuff? How'd you get the guy to blend in like that? Like, that is impressive stuff, man. Tom Cruise isn't that good at disguise. That was awesome.
If Jim Harbaugh leaves Michigan, obviously the NFL is going to be his next stop. Mo, we already know one head coach opening in the NFL after the poorly ran Carolina Panthers decided to say Frank Reich is the problem with that organization, and they gave him his walking papers yesterday. Then we have Adam Schefter, who's talking to Pat McAfee. Yes, I don't know why Pat's name slipped my mind there. But Schefty's talking to McAfee yesterday, and Mo, his prediction is that including the Carolina opening, there could be 7 to 10 coaching changes, whether it be coaches moving on, coaches getting fired, coaches retiring, however you want to package it. But he was predicting 7 to 10 come this coaching cycle. So let's take a look here, Mo. I'm just going to throw out some team names, and based on today, you tell me what you would do if you were the owner of that team come the end of the season based on all the current data you have. All right. So obviously Carolina made their choice. So that's one team that's what's one opening. Let's go Buffalo Bills, and let's say the Buffalo Bills miss the playoffs. Do you make a coaching change in Buffalo?
I would. I definitely would. I nothing against Sean McDermott. He's a good coach, but I think we talk about this often. That run, that little window they had, it's closed, and it doesn't seem like he can galvanize his guys anymore. I don't think they hear him anymore, and that happens sometimes. They tune you out at some point. They need a fresh face, a fresh voice, and he might be a mad scientist, but I think Harbaugh would do great things in Buffalo.
Can you imagine Harbaugh in Buffalo? Woo!
Right. He would probably, if Josh Allen takes off and gets a 15-yard run and runs over a linebacker, Harbaugh's going to meet him out on the field. They're going to headbutt each other. I mean, he's going to be right there for that.
Let's stay in the AFC East with the New York Jets. Obviously, this is not what the Jets envisioned. Not having Aaron Rodgers completely changed everything. Zach Wilson is a dumpster fire. Tim Boyle is a dumpster fire 2.0. If you're the owner of the New York Jets, do you let Saleh run it back with Aaron Rodgers like he was supposed to this season? Or do you look at this and say it needs to be someone different in there with Aaron?
You know what? I really would give Saleh the opportunity because he didn't have Aaron for the benefit of a season. So I think he should get another, at least this year, coming up with Aaron Rodgers. Because everything that they did this offseason hinged on having Aaron Rodgers, even a lot of moves that they made. And for him to have to turn around, and I know he was the biggest cheerleader for Zach Wilson, but that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to go like, we totally believe in the guy, and he motivates us, and the locker room's behind him. And then reality sinks in, and you're like, Zach, you're benched. Actually, you're double benched. You're not even the backup no longer. You're the third guy. I do think Saleh gets another opportunity, but I think his coaching career with the Jets going forward will hinge on everything that happens next season.
You know, Mo, Zach might have been double benched, but Mac Jones was quadruple benched in New England. So I'm going to change this question. I'm not going to ask you. That is personal. I'm not going to ask you if the Patriots are going to fire Bill Belichick because we've already talked about this, and we don't think they will. I'm going to ask you this. Does Bill Belichick choose to leave the Patriots after the season and go somewhere else?
So I know he signed some kind of extension, right? But I think that Bill Belichick, like most guys in sports, especially head coaches that have had the success that he's had, he's got an ego, and I know he's heard all the, well, Brady's gone. Look at you without Brady. You're not that good, Bill. You're Bill from Cleveland. I think that Bill Belichick will go somewhere and his mission will be to win a Super Bowl outside of Tom Brady. And I totally get why he would do that. And let's be realistic. He's not going to win that Super Bowl with the Patriots, not anytime soon. Like he's not a young man either, so I don't think Bill has like 5 years for them to kind of rebuild and get a franchise quarterback. Not when you can go somewhere and they already have a franchise quarterback in place.
This one's not being talked about, but I'm going to mention it anyways, mostly because he's a defensive head coach with a quarterback that continues, in my opinion, to prove that he is not the future quarterback of that franchise. Mike Tomlin with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, they're 7-4 right now. Yes, they're in a playoff position. But Mo, as we look ahead, we don't know if I think it's fair to say that we don't think they're going to win their division. We think that Baltimore is most likely going to walk away with that division. And I would even argue that maybe Cleveland has a better chance of coming in second, because they're just, even though they're having quarterback issues themselves, with the exception of last week versus Denver, they're getting better quarterback play out of the quarterbacks that they're throwing back there. And they've thrown 3 back there this season, and they're having moderate success with all 3 of them. Whereas you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle with Kenny Pickett, and Mo, it doesn't look like it's getting any better. So let's say they miss the playoffs, or they sneak in and they lose in the first round. At what point, if you're the owner of the Steelers, do you look at Mike Tomlin and say, you're not getting where you need to get us to?
I know you already know this, that the way the Steelers organization is ran, they're not half-hearted with coaches, right? They haven't had like 11 coaches.
Nope.
I could be wrong, but I think Tomlin's like their 3rd, maybe 4th coach ever.
Yeah.
And because he does have some clout within that organization, because he's won them a Super Bowl and they've had success under him, I don't think Mike Tomlin's under any pressure, because the owners and the front office and the GM who made the pick, they see Kenny Pickett. They see what he is. And they're like, the fact that Mike can get us to the playoffs with this offense, with that guy at quarterback, I think Mike Tomlin is as safe as any coach that doesn't have a star-studded roster. So I don't think he's on the hot seat at all. I think Mike Tomlin's fine. I think the question will be going forward, what do the Pittsburgh Steelers do in terms of the quarterback position?
Sticking in the AFC, Mo, I want to talk a little bit about the Tennessee Titans. They've already said that Mike Vrabel is safe. Do you think they hold true to that? Or if Tennessee goes on and maybe they win one more game this season, do you think they go back on their word and make a coaching change?
And this one's interesting because I think Mike Vrabel's safe, who, by the way, good coach, but he hasn't had nearly the success that Mike Tomlin had, and they had no hesitation, said he's safe. I think they want to give him the opportunity to be part of this franchise going forward. He's a good coach. Will Levis, to me, he struggles. That's what young quarterbacks do, but I think he is their quarterback of the future. And I think that running it back with Vrabel is a smart thing to do. And look, Tennessee's in flux, right? You make a huge change. The Tannehill era is over. I think the Derrick Henry era is over as well. So they're going to be major changes to the face of that franchise. And I think Vrabel's a good enough leader. That's the guy you want at the helm if you're going to go through this kind of thing where you have to start over, because they're bigger names, they're older guys other than Levis. D-Hop's there, but D-Hop's, he's 31. Is D-Hop part of their future? I don't think so. And I think they move on from Henry. I think they're going to have some fresh faces. They're going to bring in some more skilled positions to try to bolster up what not Kenny Pickett, what Will Levis can do for them. Strength of that offensive line. But I think that Vrabel is safe. I agree 100% that they're going to ride with Vrabel.
I do want to comment on what Gene said in the chat. Gene, referring to the Steelers, said it's not getting better. They had their first 400-yard game the first week without their offensive coordinator, who they fired. Yeah, I acknowledge they did do that. They also still only scored 16 points. It's great that they put up the yards, but they're not scoring. So you put up 400 yards against a Bengals team that didn't have Joe Burrow, and you win 16-10. Because you're still kicking field goals and you're not scoring touchdowns. If Joe Burrow played that game, the Bengals would have rolled you and you would have lost that game. So I understand. And yeah, I get it. Like, it's better than it looked. But when it's been terrible and it's looked horrible all season on offense, and you've been, figuring out a way to win games when you're getting rolled in total yardage by 100+ yards a game, sure, this looks better. But I guess I want to see it against a team that, isn't missing their franchise quarterback.
Right. And look, I think to his credit, I think Pickett threw for like 238 yards. Najee Harris just missed rushing for 100 yards. So yeah, they had their first 400-yard total offense game. That's good. But are they going to put together another one of those or a string of those? Let's see.
Let's jump. I think we can say that we feel Denver's comfortable with Sean Payton now. I think Sean Payton has proven he has turned that ship around, so we'll leave the Denver Broncos alone. Let's talk about the Raiders and the Chargers in the AFC West. Do you think that the Raiders make interim head coach full-time head coach, or do they pull the same move they pulled a couple of years ago and replace the interim head coach who was having some decent success with somebody else?
I hope that they give Antonio Pierce the chance to become the head coach. The history with the Raiders and Mark Davis says they will not. They'll go looking for a bigger name, because that's how Mark Davis, that's how his mind works. I'm sure it's got something to do with that haircut, but that's the way he sees things. He's always looking for a bigger name, a shinier object. So my gut instinct is no, they will not retain Antonio Pierce. And that's too bad. That's a shame, because I think that he's a bright, young head coach on the rise. And if you've watched the Raiders games, they've been more competitive. They've played harder. That's under his watch. So I just think Mark Davis is going to do what he's always done, look for a bigger name.
And do we agree, Mo, the Chargers will be looking for a head coach next season?
Oh, we agree. we definitely agree. By the way, look, that you throw those names out there. Belichick would be good there. I think the mad scientist Harbaugh will be good there. I'm just saying.
So if you look at the AFC, we have Buffalo, New England. Buffalo, if they miss the playoffs. New England, Las Vegas, and the Chargers as potential coaching opportunities, we'll say, for the offseason. Now, if we jump to the NFC, Carolina is already on the list. That makes 5. Let's take a look at the NFC East with the Giants and the Commanders. Do you see either of them making a coaching change after the season is over?
I think the Commanders make a coaching change. I hope that the coaching change is in-house and Eric Bieniemy gets his opportunity to be a head football coach. I hope that's the transition that happens there with the Commanders. As far as the Giants go, I think because of the success Daboll had last season, you've got to bring him back. And because he's had a lot of injuries, he's got a guy who's missed a lot of time. Let's see what the Giants can do with him with another full season. So I think Daboll comes back.
I think we can both agree that Chicago will most likely have a new head coach in place next season, especially with the draft capital and the cap space that they're going to have heading into the offseason. Let's talk about the NFC South. We already know Carolina is going to have a potential coach opening. Talk to me about Atlanta, New Orleans, and Tampa. Do you think any of them relieve their coach at the end of the season?
Let me simplify. So whoever wins the division, you're probably going to keep your job. But the other two guys, you're not going to keep your job. And for sure, look, we talked about this before the season started. If the Saints don't win this division, if they don't make, you know damn well Dennis Allen fired. He is fired.
He might be let go once they're officially eliminated from playoff contention if that happens before the end of the season.
I'm saying I really believe that. So that division, it's funny. The coaching carousel in that division is going to play out much like the division is played out. Whoever wins, you get to keep your job. Whoever loses, I hope you're renting.
And then the last one we have is the Arizona Cardinals. They're clearly in rebuild mode. They spent half the season without Kyler Murray. Kyler has looked okay since coming back. He's auditioning to be their quarterback next season. Do you think that their head coach is auditioning to be their head coach next season? What do you think Arizona does when it's all said and done?
Man, the frustrated thing about this organization is it's easy to say they need to make a coaching change. The problem is they always make coaching changes.
Mm-hmm.
They always make coaching changes. At some point, you got to find a guy, realize that it may take longer than 1 year to turn the program around to become a Super Bowl contender, and trust in him to build up your franchise and lead your franchise. Having said that, yeah, I think they're going to be looking for a new head coach.
In the chat, Key pointed out that they already said that Arthur Smith is safe. And listen, we all know how that works, Mo. When you come out 6 weeks ahead of time, you start saying people are safe. We want to believe you. We want to take you at your word. You know, it's almost like the owner coming out and saying that so-and-so is our quarterback for the future.
Oh, wow.
And you're like, whoa, why is he got to be saying things like that? Because usually he's not 2 weeks later.
And right. So Arthur's safe until we do those exit interviews. And then we go, well,
we thought about it a little bit.
And so what does the spin become, Chris? The spin becomes we mutually agreed to part ways.
Right. We didn't fire him.
We didn't fire him.
Different opportunity.
Right, exactly. Right. He wanted other opportunities that are out there for him, and we wanted to allow him the right to pursue them. Sounds good.
We called Robert Kraft. He helped us negotiate how to make it work. We're just good people over here, Mo.
Yeah, really.
All right. Our last segment going into the show today. Let's talk a little bit about Tom Brady. So the GOAT. You can't deny it. The GOAT has taken some shots at the NFL recently. He has said that when he watches NFL football, he sees a lot of mediocre play, a lot of mediocre offenses. And then he talked a little bit about if you expand his comments a little bit, he talked about some of the defenses that he played against back earlier in his career and through the first half of his career. And he talked about what defenses cannot do in this league anymore and how it's kind of hamstringing them a little bit. And he alluded to the fact that kind of if you're going to do this to the defenses, you should be seeing better play on the offense side of the ball, and you're not. And he didn't call out anyone really specifically by name or anything. He was a lot of generalizations. And then Micah Parsons, who I was surprised was able to talk about something besides the Dallas Cowboys. He chimed in this conversation, and he agreed with Tom Brady. He agreed with what Tom Brady alluded to on the defensive side of the football, and he agreed that across the league, this season is just a lot of average play across the board. Then Alex Smith came out, former NFL quarterback, and Alex Smith, and he stayed on brand. He was talking about mediocrity, and he wanted to point out that, if we're talking about mediocre quarterback play and mediocre offensive play and just mediocre play in the league in general this season, he wanted to make sure that he pointed out that for the entire time that Tom Brady played in this league, not just when he was in the AFC East, but if you also look at when he moved over to the NFC South, he played in some pretty mediocre divisions. He also went on to talk about how the divisions that he played in were probably the least competitive divisions in the league at that time. And this has been brought up previously by anti-Brady fans, Patriot haters, however you want to look at it, Mo. But what Alex Smith said isn't false. So if you take a look at the AFC East, for example, when Brady came in, name the best quarterback the Buffalo Bills had during that run.
I can't.
You can't. It would probably be Josh Allen towards the end of Brady's run.
At the very end, yes, Josh Allen.
But if you take Josh Allen out of it,
Fitzpatrick
or Tyrod Taylor,
yeah,
right? I mean, that's the best quarterback he faced against Buffalo all those years. By the way, Tom Brady owned the Buffalo Bills all those years. Let's look at the New York Jets. who was the best quarterback the New York Jets had during Tom Brady's run in the AFC East?
Was maybe
Geno?
Geno? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe Geno. No, maybe Vinny. Was Vinny there? I think Vinny was there.
Maybe at the very beginning, but that was old Vinny at that point.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But hey, if that's the guy, that's the guy, right?
That might have been the guy, though, right?
But I mean, Geno got the Jets to a couple of AFC Championship games.
Sanchez took him places, right?
Sanchez, but again, what are we talking about here? Tyrod Taylor, Mark Sanchez.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I actually saw that, and I was like, I co-signed and everything Alex Smith said. Like, Tom Brady's great, and man, but if you saw how that played out in a quarterback-driven league, he was the only quarterback in that division.
Oh, Chad Pennington. That's silly of me, Mo. I should have said Chad Pennington
was a good player, but he was a healthy good player for what, 2 years maybe tops?
Because
like Chad Pennington, he stayed hurt.
Pennington might have also been the best Dolphins quarterback during that stretch, because in his 1 year in Miami, he led Miami to the playoffs.
He was a good player.
But to Alex Smith's point, and I get it, you can't control who's in your division no more than you can control what teams are on your schedule every season. You have to go do what you have to go do. And then when he got to the playoffs, whether it was the defense early or it was his arm and his mind later on, he won Super Bowls. This isn't a conversation to try to say Tom Brady isn't the greatest quarterback of all time or one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. This is a conversation to say, if you are going to disrespect the game currently, which is what Tom Brady did and what Micah Parsons signed off on, then you are going to open yourself up to having people look at why you found as much success as you did in your career. And when you're almost guaranteed, Mo, 6 wins a season, which, let's be honest, he was basically guaranteed 6 wins a season. I know
on a bad year, what did they go 4-2? On a bad year, in the
5-1.
5-1.
I mean, the second half of his career, Miami beat him more in Miami. I don't think Miami ever beat him in New England. So I think the second half of the year, he split his games with Miami, and they would win the Miami version of it. So I still think he had a winning record against Miami, but it was closer to 500. But most years he was going 5-1, 6-0 against his division, at which point, if you just win 4 of your other games, you're winning the, so I get it. I understand why Brady said what he said, Mo, but for me, not the time or the place. Like, you are the GOAT. Say nice things, give praise, right? Like,
and don't forget, it's not like he didn't reap the benefits from the way the game was changed on the back end of his career. He reaped the benefits too.
He helped change the game into what it is today.
So
it's his fault.
Right. So he's one of the guys that they wanted to have defenders wrap up, right? Don't hit him. Wrap him up. He benefited from the way that DBs couldn't touch wide receivers. He benefited from how they changed tackling, the whole nine. Like, everything Parsons said is right, but Brady benefited from that too. He had a slice of that pie too.
And Brady was one of the handful that a look drew a flag. You knew the look. You knew that when Tom Brady was sitting on the ground or Tom Brady got up and he gave the look, a flag usually came. Like, and I get it. That's what happens sometimes. LeBron knows the look when LeBron, and if he doesn't get it, he sends in tapes. So
that's it in tapes.
But Mo, you know that certain players reach a point in their career where they're going to get more calls than other players. It's just the way it works. It's not cheating or anything like that. It's just it's the way it works. And Brady got to that point. It is. He got to that point in his career and he benefited from it. So to have all of that and then look back at the game a year or two removed from it and just be like, well, it's pretty much garbage in that league now since I left. Tom, come on now, my guy. Be better than that, right?
Look, we can agree that there's some bad quarterback play, but I don't think that the league in general, the product is bad. But it really does just put emphasis on the quarterback position, right? If you look at the Jets, if they had a quarterback, wouldn't we be talking about them in a different light? I mean, And you can say that about a couple of other franchises as well. That's how big a deal the quarterback position is in this current NFL.
All right, Mo, great show this morning. Close us out, sir.
Appreciate everybody for checking in on us, listening to us, showing support. Check out all the great content that we have to offer on Sports Empire Network. Check out the Empire.
Make sure you're back here same time, same place tomorrow morning. We got Will coming on the show to talk some NBA basketball. Lots of stuff happening in the NBA. We're going to break all of that down right here tomorrow morning. Coffee and Sports, same time, same place, and we will see you in the morning.
I mean, you can see right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboy fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready.
I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face.
Oh, from Brooklyn.
Hey, you guys any